I learned real fast that nothing ruins a quiet Tuesday morning quite like a woman named Brenda knocking on your door with a clipboard and a smile that could cut glass. I opened the door to find her standing there in her pressed white blouse and khaki capris, her highlighted bob perfectly styled despite the humid Georgia air. Behind her, the manicured lawns of Riverside Oaks stretched out like some suburban painting, each house a slight variation of beige and cream, each mailbox exactly 4 feet from the curb. "Lucas Quinton?" she asked, though we both knew she knew exactly who I was. "That's me," I said, already sensing this wasn't going to be good. "I'm Brenda Patterson, president of the Riverside Oaks HOA board. I'm here about the complaint we received regarding noise violations coming from your property." I blinked. "Noise violations? I work from home. I'm quieter than a library most days." She consulted her clipboard with theatrical precision. "On June 15th, 17th, and 19th, neighbors reported hearing generator sounds coming from your residence between the hours of 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. According to Section 12.4 of our HOA bylaws, no gas-powered equipment may be operated after 7 p.m. on weekdays. The generator. Of course. I'd been running my backup generator for a few hours those evenings because I was stress testing my new home server setup. I worked as a network security consultant, and having reliable power was literally part of my job. The generator was a quiet Honda model, barely louder than a conversation, but apparently in Riverside Oaks, that was still too much. "Look, Brenda, I understand there are rules, but we're talking about maybe 6 hours total over 2 weeks. The generator is pretty quiet and I was doing it for work." "The rules are the rules, Mr. Quinton." She handed me a printed notice. "This is your first official warning. The fine is $250. If it happens again, the fine doubles." I stared at the paper in my hand. $250 for running a generator that probably bothered no one. You've got to be kidding me. "I don't kid about community standards," Brenda said. "Payment is due within 14 days. Have a wonderful day." She turned and walked back down my driveway, her white sneakers squeaking against the concrete. I watched her get into her silver Lexus and drive away, and I knew right then that this woman was going to be a problem in my life. I paid the fine because I didn't have much choice. The HOA had legal teeth, and I'd read enough horror stories about people losing their homes over unpaid HOA dues and fines. But I didn't forget it. I couldn't. Every time I logged into my bank account and saw that $250 deduction, I felt my jaw clench. 3 weeks later, I was in my home office on a Saturday afternoon when my phone rang. It was Dale Morrison, one of my neighbors from 2 streets over. Dale was retired military, mid-60s, with the kind of straightforward personality that made him easy to talk to. "Lucas, you got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, what's up?" "You know anything about emergency warning systems?" I leaned back in my chair. "Depends on what kind." "Why?" "The HOA has those tornado sirens installed around the neighborhood, right? 4 of them total. Well, the main control box is acting up. I volunteer with the county emergency management, so I know a bit about this stuff, but this system is beyond me. It's all computerized and networked. I heard through the grapevine that you're some kind of tech wizard." "Network security consultant," I said. "But I know systems. What's wrong with it?" "Controllers throwing errors. The sirens won't test properly. We've got severe weather season coming up, and if a tornado warning gets issued, those sirens might not go off." Brenda asked me to look at it, but I told her she needs a professional. She said the HOA doesn't have budget for it until next quarter. I felt something shift in my chest. An idea, dark and appealing. Where's the control box? In the community center, in that utility closet by the back entrance. You want to take a look. When does Brenda need it fixed? Soon as possible, I'd think. Lives could be at stake if we get a bad storm. I let the silence hang for just a moment. You know what, Dale? I'd love to help, but I'm pretty swamped with work right now. Maybe she can find someone else. Dale sighed. Yeah, I figured you'd be busy. I'll let her know. Thanks anyway. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my monitor. The right thing to do would be to help. I knew that. But Brenda had shown me exactly how much she cared about reasonableness and community when she'd slapped me with that ridiculous fine. She wanted to play by the letter of the law. Fine. I wasn't required to volunteer my time to fix the HOA's emergency equipment. Let her find someone else. Except she didn't find someone else. 2 weeks passed. I knew because Dale stopped by my house one evening looking worried. Lucas, I don't suppose you've reconsidered about those sirens. Still swamped, Dale. Sorry. Brenda tried calling a couple companies. One quoted her $3,000 to diagnose and fix it. She nearly had a stroke. The other one can't come out for 6 weeks. That's rough, I said, and I meant it, but not rough enough for me to volunteer. There's a tropical system developing in the Gulf. Could turn into something nasty. If it does, and if it spawns tornadoes when it comes through Georgia. Dale trailed off, shaking his head. I felt the first prickle of guilt, but I pushed it down. Brenda could pay the $3,000. The HOA had money. They'd collected that $250 from me easily enough. Dale left, and I tried to focus on my work, but the conversation nagged at me. I wasn't a monster. I didn't actually want people to get hurt. But I also wasn't going to let Brenda walk all over me and then expect me to save her when she needed help. The next afternoon, I was getting my mail when Brenda's Lexus pulled up beside my mailbox. She rolled down her window, and I could see the tension in her face. Mr. Quinton, I understand you have expertise with computer systems. Network security, I said, flipping through a stack of junk mail. Dale Morrison mentioned that you might be able to help with our emergency siren system. Dale mentioned that, did he? The system is malfunctioning and we need it operational. Severe weather season is here. I looked at her directly. And you need someone to fix it. Yes, for free, I'm assuming. Her jaw tightened. It's for the safety of the community, your community. Right, my community. The one that fined me $250 for running a quiet generator for a few hours. I closed my mailbox and started walking back toward my house. Brenda got out of her car. Mr. Quinton, that fine was legitimate. You violated the noise ordinance. And this request is what exactly? Because I don't remember seeing anything in the HOA bylaws that says I'm required to provide free technical support. This is about safety. Then pay someone to fix it. I hear there are companies that do this sort of thing. The quotes we've received are unreasonable. I turned around. But my generator fine was reasonable. See, that's interesting, Brenda. When it comes to punishing me, money is no object. But when you need help, suddenly budgets are tight. Her face flushed. I'm asking you, neighbor to neighbor, to help your community. And I'm telling you, neighbor to neighbor, that I'm too busy. Have a great day. I went inside and closed the door. My heart was pounding. I'd never been the confrontational type, but something about Brenda's entitled attitude made my blood boil. She'd shown no mercy when fining me, had offered no understanding or flexibility. Why should I show her any? That night, the guilt came back stronger. I lay in bed thinking about Dale's worried face, about families in the neighborhood who had kids, elderly people who might not hear their phones if a tornado warning came through. The sirens were a backup system, a fail-safe. But then I thought about Brenda's smug face when she'd handed me that fine notice, and the guilt evaporated into anger again. The weather forecast got more serious over the next few days. The tropical system, now named Tropical Storm Veronica, was strengthening as it moved through the Gulf. Models showed it making landfall near Apalachicola, Florida, then tracking northeast through Georgia. The storm itself wouldn't be the main threat. It was the tornadoes that formed in the outer bands that posed the real danger. I was at the grocery store stocking up on water and batteries when I ran into Rachel Chen, another neighbor who lived on my street. She had her 2 kids with her, both under 10. "Hey, Lucas," she said, maneuvering her cart next to mine. "You getting ready for the storm?" "Just being cautious," I said. "Smart. I'm a little nervous about it. This will be our first severe weather event since we moved here last year." She glanced at her kids, who were debating which flavor of Pop-Tarts to get. "I'm glad we have those tornado sirens in the neighborhood, though." Extra peace of mind, my stomach twisted. "Yeah," I managed. "Okay, you two, 1 box each," Rachel said to her kids, then smiled at me. "Stay safe, Lucas." I watched her walk away with her kids, and the guilt came roaring back stronger than ever. This wasn't about Brenda anymore. This was about Rachel's kids, about Dale and his wife, about the 78 families that lived in Riverside Oaks. I stood there in the aisle, staring at rows of canned goods, having an internal war with myself. My pride said Brenda deserved this, that she needed to learn she couldn't treat people like garbage and then expect favors. My conscience said people could die, and could I really live with that? I grabbed my cart and headed for the checkout, still undecided. That evening, Dale called again. "Lucas, I know you said you're busy, but I'm asking you man to man. Will you please look at these sirens? I'll pay you myself if that's what it takes." "Dale, you don't have to do that." "Then will you do it?" I closed my eyes. "Dale, did Brenda ever tell you why I might not be eager to help the HOA? I know about the generator fine. I told her it was petty for what it's worth." "Did you?" "I did. Look, Brenda can be difficult, I won't argue that. She takes the rules too seriously sometimes. But this is bigger than her, bigger than any disagreement you two have. Please." I thought about Rachel's kids. I thought about the elderly couple 3 houses down who always waved when I drove past. I thought about the consequences of my stubbornness. "I'll come look at it," I said finally. "But I'm not promising I can fix it." Dale let out a breath. Thank you, Lucas. When can you come?" "Tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock at the community center. I'll meet you there." After we hung up, I sat on my couch feeling like I just lost some important battle. But I also felt the weight of the guilt lift slightly. I was doing the right thing. Even if Brenda didn't deserve my help, everyone else did. The next morning, I arrived at the community center with my laptop and a tool kit. Dale was waiting outside along with Brenda and another HOA board member, a thin man in his 50s named Kenneth Harper. "Mr. Quinton," Brenda said stiffly. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but didn't say anything. Dale led us inside to a utility closet that smelled like old carpet and cleaning supplies. On a shelf mounted to the wall was a metal control box about the size of a briefcase with various cables running out of it. "This is it," Dale said. "The main controller for all 4 sirens. It's supposed to receive signals from the county emergency management system and automatically activate the sirens. But it's been showing error codes for 3 weeks now." I opened the front panel and immediately saw the problem. The system was older than I'd expected, probably 15 years old, with a mix of hardwired connections and a primitive network interface. The LCD display showed a blinking Error 47 message. "You have the manual for this system?" I asked. Kenneth fumbled with a filing cabinet and produced a worn binder. I flipped through it, finding the error code section. Error 47 meant communication failure with remote units. I spent the next hour tracing cables, checking connections, and running diagnostic commands through the system's interface. The problem became clear pretty quickly. One of the network switches that connected the Sirens to the controller had failed. Without it, the controller couldn't communicate with 3 of the 4 Sirens, and the system was designed to lock out if it couldn't verify all units were operational. "Your network switch is dead," I told them. "It's not getting power. Could be the power supply, could be the switch itself." "Can you fix it?" Brenda asked. I looked at the switch. It was an ancient Cisco model, the kind that hadn't been manufactured in over a decade. "I can try. Let me check the power supply first." I tested the power adapter with my multimeter. Dead. The switch might be fine, it just wasn't getting power. "The power supply is blown," I said. "If the switch itself is okay, I just need to find a compatible replacement power supply." "Do you have one?" Brenda asked hopefully. "Not with me, but I can check my supplies at home. I keep a lot of old equipment for exactly this kind of situation." Dale looked relieved. "That would be amazing." I drove home and dug through my garage storage. I had boxes of old networking equipment from various jobs and projects over the years. Finally, in a box labeled MISC Power Adapters, I found one that matched the voltage and amperage requirements. It wasn't the exact model, but it would work. Back at the community center, I connected the power supply and held my breath. The network switch came to life, its status lights blinking green. The controller's LCD display flickered, ran through some kind of self-test, and then showed system ready. "Is that it?" Kenneth asked. "Let me test it." I accessed the controller's menu and ran a manual test sequence. Outside, I heard the Sirens begin to wail, one after another, a rising and falling tone that echoed through the neighborhood. After 30 seconds, I stopped the test, and the Sirens fell silent. "We're back in business," I said. Dale clapped me on the shoulder. "Outstanding work, Lucas. You just saved this neighborhood." Brenda nodded. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Quinton. We appreciate your assistance." Her tone was formal, distant, like she was thanking a contractor rather than a neighbor who just volunteered his time and equipment. No apology, no acknowledgement of the irony that she'd fined me for helping myself, but now needed me to help her. "You're welcome," I said, packing up my tools. "But next time you need technical help, you might want to budget for it, or at least not find the people who can actually help you." Brenda's expression hardened. The fine was legitimate and stands. This was a separate matter. I stared at her. Right, of course it was. I left before I said something I'd regret. Dale walked me out to my car. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think she owes you more than just thanks." "It's fine, Dale. I didn't do it for her. I did it because it was the right thing to do." "You're a good man, Lucas." I drove home feeling hollow. I'd done the right thing, yes, but it rankled that Brenda couldn't even acknowledge the situation's basic unfairness. In her world, rules were rules and gratitude was a formality, not a feeling. Tropical storm Veronica made landfall 2 days later. It weakened to a tropical depression as it moved inland, but as predicted, it spawned several tornadoes as it tracked through southern Georgia. One touched down about 15 miles from Riverside Oaks, an EF2 that destroyed a barn and damaged several houses. Our neighborhood was spared, but the tornado sirens went off twice during the storm, warning everyone to take shelter. After the weather passed, Rachel stopped by my house with a plate of cookies. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Dale told me you fixed the sirens. When they went off yesterday, we got the kids into the basement immediately. I can't imagine how scary it would have been if we hadn't had that warning." "I'm glad everyone's safe," I said, accepting the cookies. "Brenda should have been the one bringing you these, but..." Rachel shrugged. Well, you know how she is. I'm learning. Rachel hesitated. Can I ask you something? Why did you fix them? Dale mentioned you and Brenda had some kind of dispute. I considered the question, because it was bigger than her and me, and because I'd never forgive myself if something happened and I could have prevented it. Rachel smiled. That's what I thought. You're good people, Lucas. She paused. For what it's worth, a lot of us think that fine was ridiculous. Brenda takes this HOA president thing way too seriously. After she left, I ate one of the cookies and thought about how strange the whole situation was. I'd fixed the sirens, potentially saved lives, and all I'd gotten from the HOA was a stiff thank you. Meanwhile, I was still out $250 for running a generator that bothered no one. 2 weeks later, everything went to hell. I was working in my office when I heard the rumble of a diesel engine outside. Looking out my window, I saw a county water department truck parked at the curb. 2 workers in reflective vests were examining a water meter at the property line between my house and my neighbor's. I went outside. Everything okay? One of the workers, a guy in his 40s with a graying beard, looked up. You live here? Yeah, Lucas Quinton. We've got a problem. There's a leak in the water main. It's small right now, but it's going to get worse. We need to replace about 30 feet of pipe. Okay. When? Starting tomorrow, we'll have to shut off water to this section of the street for probably 2 days while we work. I grimaced. 2 days without water. We'll set up a temporary supply station at the community center. You can fill jugs there. Sorry for the inconvenience. They left, and I started making plans for 2 days without running water. It was annoying, but these things happened. The next morning, the work started. The county crew dug up the street, exposing the old pipe. By afternoon, they'd shut off the water and my taps ran dry. I'd filled my bathtub before the shutoff, so I had water for flushing toilets and washing hands, but I'd need to get drinking water from the community center. That evening, I walked over with a couple of 5-gallon jugs. A large plastic tank had been set up in the parking lot, with a spigot at the bottom. Several neighbors were there, filling various containers. I was filling my second jug when Brenda's Lexus pulled up. She got out and approached the tank with a frown. This is unacceptable, she announced to no one in particular. The county should have given us more notice. It's a water main break, Brenda, said Tom Waverly, an older man I recognized from the monthly HOA meetings. These things happen. They happen because our infrastructure is old and poorly maintained. The county is incompetent. I kept my mouth shut and finished filling my jugs. As I was leaving, Brenda called out, Mr. Quinton, a word please. I set down my jugs. What's up? I wanted to inform you that we'll be conducting a community-wide inspection next month. All exterior elements of properties must be in compliance with HOA standards. Okay, I said slowly. Why are you telling me specifically? I noticed during my drive through yesterday that your mailbox post is showing rust at the base. That will need to be addressed before the inspection. I looked at her. My mailbox is fine. The standards require all mailbox posts to be maintained in good condition, free of rust, peeling paint, or other signs of deterioration. Brenda, there's a tiny spot of surface rust at ground level. You'd have to crouch down to even see it. Nonetheless, it must be addressed. I'd hate for you to receive another fine. There it was. The threat, delivered with a smile. She was letting me know that she was watching me, that my help with the sirens had earned me exactly nothing in terms of goodwill. I'll take care of it, I said, picking up my water jugs. Wonderful. Have a nice evening. I walked home seething. The mailbox post was fine. The rust she'd mentioned was barely visible, the kind of minor wear that every mailbox in the neighborhood probably had. She was looking for excuses to find me, to punish me for daring to push back against her authority. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the situation. I'd fixed the sirens, done the right thing, and Brenda was still targeting me. The unfairness of it burned in my chest. I'd shown her mercy and she'd responded with more pettiness. Fine, I thought, if that's how she wants to play it. The next morning, I called Dale. Hey, that network switch in the siren controller. Do you have a backup? A backup? I don't think so. Why? Just wondering. Those old switches fail sometimes. If it dies again, you'd be in the same situation as before. Should we get a backup? Probably a good idea. You can find compatible ones on eBay pretty cheap. I can send you a link if you want. That'd be great, thanks. I sent him the link, then sat back and thought about what I'd just done. I hadn't lied. Old switches did fail. But I'd planted a seed, made Dale aware of the vulnerability without quite saying what I was thinking. What I was thinking was that if Brenda wanted to keep targeting me, I had leverage. The sirens only worked because of the power supply I'd provided from my own equipment. That power supply was my property. I could take it back. I wasn't sure if I'd actually do it. But knowing I could felt good. The water main work took 3 days instead of 2. By the time the water came back on, everyone was irritated and tired of hauling jugs from the community center. I was running my kitchen faucet, watching the brown sediment clear when someone knocked on my door. It was Kenneth Harper, the HOA board member I'd met during the siren repair. Lucas, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure, come in. Kenneth followed me into the living room but didn't sit. He looked uncomfortable. I'm here unofficially, he said. I wanted to give you a heads up. Brenda is talking about filing a formal citation against your property. For what? She says your lawn has clover growing in it, which violates the weed policy, and she's still on about the mailbox. I felt my jaw clench. My lawn is fine, I treat it regularly. If there's clover, it's minimal. I know. I drove by your place. I couldn't see anything wrong, but Brenda is. She's on a mission about something. I think she doesn't like that you stood up to her about the generator fine. So she's going to harass me with petty citations. Kenneth nodded. That's what it looks like. I wanted you to know so you can stay on top of things. Document everything. Take photos of your property. If she does cite you, you have the right to appeal to the full board. Thanks for the warning, Kenneth. For what it's worth, not everyone on the board agrees with how she does things. But she's been president for 6 years and she's very persuasive. After Kenneth left, I walked around my property with my phone, photographing everything. My lawn was immaculate. My mailbox was fine. My house exterior was clean and well maintained. Brenda could look all she wanted. She wouldn't find anything legitimate to cite me for, but the fact that she was trying made my blood boil. That night, I made a decision. I drove to the community center with a screwdriver and my laptop. The building was closed, but I had the access code for the back door. It had been given to me during the siren repair, so I could come and go as needed. Inside, in the utility closet, I opened the siren controller and disconnected my power supply. I left the dead original power supply connected to the network switch, so it would look like everything was in place, but the switch had no power. The controller's display showed Error 47, again. I took my power supply home and put it on a shelf in my garage, then waited. 3 days passed. Then Dale called, his voice stressed. Lucas, the sirens are down again. Same error code as before. Can you come take a look? When did they go down? We just discovered it during the monthly test. The system is showing the communication error again. Must be the switch failed completely. I was afraid that might happen. Can you fix it? I paused, letting the silence hang. Dale, I need to be honest with you. That power supply I used last time, that was my personal property. I pulled it from my own stock. I know, and we appreciated that. The thing is, the HOA never reimbursed me for it, and I'm getting kind of tired of Brenda treating me like a problem while expecting me to solve her problems for free. Dale was quiet for a moment. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've got work deadlines, and I'm not in a position to drop everything and volunteer my time and equipment again. Especially when the HOA president is actively looking for reasons to fine me. She's doing what? Asked Kenneth Harper. Brenda's been driving by my house looking for code violations. She's trying to cite me for imaginary clover in my lawn and a speck of rust on my mailbox. Dale swore under his breath. Lucas, I had no idea. That's completely unacceptable. It is what it is. Look, the sirens need a proper repair, not a band-aid fix with donated equipment. The HOA should pay a professional to upgrade the whole system. It's 15 years old. It's going to keep having problems. But that'll take weeks to arrange, and we're still in severe weather season. Then maybe Brenda should have thought about that before she decided to target me. Dale sighed heavily. I'll talk to her, but Lucas, if there's a storm and those sirens don't work. That's on the HOA, Dale, not me. I fixed it once as a favor. I'm not obligated to keep fixing it every time something breaks. After we hung up, I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt. The satisfaction came from finally having some leverage over Brenda. The guilt came from knowing that the siren's failure put people at risk, but I pushed the guilt down. This was Brenda's responsibility. She was the HOA president. If she wanted the sirens to work, she could pay to have them properly fixed, or she could apologize for the generator fine and stop harassing me. Either option would work. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Mr. Quinton, this is Brenda Patterson. I understand you're refusing to repair our emergency siren system. I'm not refusing anything. I'm just not volunteering. Dale said you removed equipment that was part of the system. I kept my voice calm. I removed my personal property. That power supply belonged to me. I loaned it to the HOA. Now I need it back for my own equipment. That system is critical for community safety. I agree, which is why the HOA should hire a professional to fix it properly. We don't have budget for that until next quarter. Then I guess you need to find budget, or you can wait until next quarter. Either way, it's not my problem. Brenda's voice turned cold. I want to be very clear about something, Mr. Quinton. If there is a weather emergency and people are hurt because those sirens don't function, you will be held responsible. I laughed, actually laughed. No, Brenda, I won't. I'm not an HOA board member. I'm not employed by the HOA. I have no legal or ethical obligation to maintain your equipment. You, on the other hand, as HOA president, absolutely do have that obligation. So if people get hurt, the liability is entirely yours. This is outrageous. You're endangering the community. You're endangering the community by refusing to properly maintain critical safety equipment. I fixed it once for free using my own parts. That was a gift. You don't get to demand more gifts. We'll see about that. She hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand, adrenaline pumping. I'd just drawn a line in the sand. No more Mr. Nice Guy. If Brenda wanted to play hardball, I could play too. The next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. Official HOA stationery. Inside were 2 citations. One for unauthorized plant growth clover in lawn area, and one for deteriorated condition of mailbox post. Total fines, $400. I took photos of both citations, then photographed my lawn and mailbox again. There was no clover. The mailbox was fine. These citations were completely fabricated. I called Kenneth Harper. I just got cited for violations that don't exist. Kenneth groaned. Let me guess. Clover and the mailbox. Yep, file an appeal. You have 10 days. The appeal hearing will be in front of the full board. Will that actually help? Honestly, I don't know. Brenda controls most of the board, but it's your right and it creates a paper trail. If this ever goes to court, you want documentation that you fought these citations. Court. The word sent a chill down my spine. Could it really escalate that far? I spent the rest of the day drafting an appeal letter, attaching photos of my property showing no violations existed. I hand-delivered it to the HOA management office, got a stamped receipt, and filed my own copy. Then I waited. The appeal hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, the weather forecast showed another potential severe weather system developing. Nothing as strong as Tropical Storm Veronica, but enough to prompt tornado watches across central Georgia. Dale called me twice more, asking me to reconsider fixing the sirens. I held firm. This wasn't about the sirens anymore. It was about Brenda abusing her authority, and it was about me refusing to be bullied. The night before the appeal hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Rachel's kids, about the elderly couple down the street, about what would happen if a tornado actually hit the neighborhood with the sirens down. Would I be able to live with myself? But then I thought about Brenda's smug face, about the $400 in fraudulent fines, about the principle of the thing. If I gave in now, she'd know she could control me with threats and harassment. I'd never be free of her. The appeal hearing was held at the community center, in the same multipurpose room where they held monthly HOA meetings. The board sat at a long table at the front, Brenda in the center, with Kenneth and 3 other board members flanking her. About a dozen residents sat in the audience, probably there to watch the show. I sat at a small table facing the board, my folder of photos and documentation in front of me. Brenda called the meeting to order with a rap of her gavel. We're here to address the appeal filed by Quinton regarding citations issued on August 21st. Mr. Quinton, you have 10 minutes to present your case. I stood. Thank you. I received 2 citations, one for Clover in my lawn and one for a deteriorated mailbox post. I'm appealing both because neither violation exists. I walked to the board table and handed each member a copy of my photos. These were taken the same day I received the citations. As you can see, my lawn is in excellent condition with no visible clover. My mailbox post has no rust or deterioration visible to the naked eye. Brenda glanced at the photos dismissively. Mr. Quinton, I personally observed both violations during my inspection of your property. Then I'd like to see the photos you took documenting these violations. She blinked. I didn't photograph them. So you have no evidence that these violations existed, but you're fining me $400 based on your word alone. My observations as HOA president are sufficient documentation. Kenneth cleared his throat. Actually, Brenda, our enforcement policy does require photographic evidence for all citations. It's been policy for 2 years now, specifically to avoid disputes like this. Brenda's face reddened. The violations were clear and obvious. Photographs weren't necessary. But the policy says they are necessary, Kenneth insisted. He looked at the other board members. I move that we dismiss both citations due to lack of documentation. One of the other board members, a woman named Patricia Donovan, nodded. I second that motion. Brenda looked furious. We have a discretionary clause that allows the president to waive certain procedural requirements in clear-cut cases. This isn't a clear-cut case, Kenneth said. Mr. Quinton's photos show no violations. You have no photos showing violations. There's nothing clear-cut about it. The vote was 3 in favor of dismissing the citations, 2 against. Brenda and one other board member voted to uphold the fines, but they were outvoted. I felt a wave of relief. Thank you. Brenda's expression was stone. This meeting is adjourned. She gathered her papers and left quickly, heels clicking sharply against the floor. Kenneth came over to me after the room cleared. You made an enemy tonight. I made an enemy when I ran my generator, I said, but thanks for backing me up. Someone needs to keep her in check. She's gotten worse over the years. The power has gone to her head. I went home feeling vindicated but also uneasy. I'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. And the sirens were still broken. 2 nights later, the severe weather hit. It wasn't a major storm system, just a strong line of thunderstorms with gusty winds and hail. But the National Weather Service issued tornado warnings for 2 counties adjacent to ours, and the storm was moving our direction. I sat in my living room, watching the weather radar on my laptop and listening to the rain hammer against the windows. The county emergency management issued a tornado watch for our area. If it got upgraded to a warning, the sirens should sound. My phone buzzed. A text from Dale. Tornado warning issued for our county. Sirens aren't going off. Hope everyone checks their phones. My stomach twisted. This was it. The scenario I'd been dreading. People's lives were potentially at risk, and I had the power supply that could fix the sirens sitting in my garage. I looked at the radar. The strongest part of the storm was 20 miles west and tracking northeast. It would pass north of us, probably. We'd get rain and wind, but likely no tornado, probably. My phone rang. It was Rachel. Lucas, did you get the tornado warning notification? Yeah, I got it. I'm in the basement with the kids. They're scared. I thought the sirens would go off. They're broken, Rachel. The HOA hasn't fixed them yet. But you fixed them before, I know. Can you fix them now? I closed my eyes. Rachel, it's complicated. My kids are crying, Lucas, please. I looked at the radar again. The storm was moving fast. Even if I went to the community center right now and reinstalled the power supply, it would take at least 15 minutes. The storm would be past us by then. Rachel, I need you to listen. The storm is going to pass north of us. We're not in the direct path. You and the kids are safe in the basement. Just stay there for another 30 minutes until it passes. You're sure? I'm watching the radar, I'm sure. Okay, thank you. After she hung up, I sat there feeling sick. I'd been right about the storm. It did pass north of us without incident. But what if I'd been wrong? What if a tornado had formed and touched down in Riverside Oaks? I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't play games with people's lives just to spite Brenda. The next morning, I drove to the community center with the power supply. I let myself into the utility closet and reconnected it to the network switch. The sirens came back online, the controller showing system ready. Then I called Dale. The sirens are fixed. You fixed them. When? Just now. Lucas, I don't know what to say. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just tell Brenda she needs to get that system properly upgraded. I'm not doing this again. I'll tell her. I went home feeling defeated. I'd caved. I'd let Brenda win. But as I thought about Rachel's scared kids in the basement, I knew I'd made the right choice. Some principles weren't worth people's lives. I expected that to be the end of it. I'd fix the sirens again, and hopefully Brenda would leave me alone. But 2 days later, I got another letter from the HOA. This one was a lien notice. The HOA was placing a lien on my property for unpaid fines and penalties, totaling $650. The breakdown included the original generator fine, late fees, and administrative charges. I stared at the letter in disbelief. I'd paid the generator fine on time. I had the bank records to prove it. This lien was fraudulent. I called Kenneth immediately. Brenda just filed a fraudulent lien against my property. What? For what? I explained the situation. Kenneth was silent for a long moment. "This is beyond me, Lucas. This is potentially criminal. You need to lawyer up." "I paid that fine on time. I have proof." "Then your lawyer will get this sorted out. But I'm telling you, Brenda has crossed a line. This isn't just petty HOA politics anymore." I spent the next 2 days calling lawyers. Most of the ones I contacted didn't want to touch an HOA dispute. The cases were messy and rarely worth the billable hours. Finally, I found a lawyer named Martin Cross who specialized in HOA law and property disputes. Martin's office was in a modest building in downtown Macon. He was in his early 50s, balding, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many petty disputes turn ugly. "Tell me everything," he said, leaning back in his chair. I told him about the generator fine, the Sirens, the fraudulent citations, and now the lien. I showed him all my documentation, photos, bank records, correspondence. Martin listened without interrupting. When I finished, he tapped his pen against his desk. "Here's the situation. The HOA president has clearly targeted you, and she's now committed fraud by filing a lien for a debt that doesn't exist. That's illegal. We can fight this and we'll win. Good, but it's going to be expensive. Legal fees for something like this start around $5,000 and can go much higher if it drags out." My stomach sank. $5,000. At minimum. HOA disputes are time-consuming. Lots of documentation, lots of back and forth. It adds up. I thought about my savings, about whether this was worth it. But then I thought about Brenda's smug face, about how she'd keep doing this to me and probably others if no one stood up to her. "Do it," I said. "File whatever we need to file." Martin nodded. "I'll send a formal demand letter to the HOA demanding they remove the lien within 10 days. If they don't, we'll file suit for fraudulent lien and harassment." What are the chances they'll remove it? Hard to say. If Brenda's rational, she'll back down when she realizes this could turn into a legal nightmare for her personally. If she's not rational, he shrugged. Then we go to court. The demand letter went out 3 days later. 7 days after that, I got a response, not from Brenda but from the HOA's lawyer. The letter stated that the lien was filed in error and would be removed, but it offered no apology and no explanation. "They blinked," Martin said when I forwarded him the letter. Brenda's lawyer probably told her she'd be personally liable if this went to court. So it's over. The lien issue is over. But Lucas, this woman has it out for you. She's going to keep trying. You need to decide how you want to handle that. I thought about it. What are my options? You can keep fighting individual battles as they come up. You can try to get her removed as HOA president, though that requires a vote of the membership and is an uphill battle. Or you can sell your house and move. I'm not moving. I like this house. I like the neighborhood. I shouldn't have to leave because one person has a power trip. Then you're in for a long fight. I left Martin's office feeling exhausted. This whole situation had spiraled so far beyond that stupid generator fine. Now I was spending thousands on legal fees, spending my time documenting every interaction with the HOA, living in constant stress about what Brenda would try next. That night, I decided to change tactics. If Brenda wanted to play dirty, I'd go over her head. I started researching Georgia HOA law, looking for ammunition I could use. What I found was interesting. Georgia law requires HOAs to hold annual elections for board positions. Those elections had to be properly noticed and conducted according to the HOA's bylaws. I pulled out my copy of the Riverside Oaks HOA bylaws and started reading. According to the bylaws, board elections were supposed to be held every October, with nominations opening 60 days prior. But as I checked my records, I realized something. There hadn't been an election last October, or the October before that. In fact, I couldn't remember there ever being an election since I'd moved in 3 years ago. Brenda had been president for 6 years, Kenneth had mentioned. But if the bylaws required annual elections, how was that possible? I called Kenneth. Quick question. When was the last HOA board election? Kenneth paused. Election? I don't think we've had one in. Wow, I can't remember. We usually just reappoint the same people. But the bylaws require annual elections. Do they? I didn't realize that. I felt a surge of excitement. Kenneth, if the board hasn't been properly elected, is the board even legitimate? I don't know. That's a good question. I called Martin the next day. I think the HOA board might not be legitimate. They haven't held elections in years, but the bylaws require them annually. Martin was quiet for a moment. If that's true, any actions taken by an illegitimate board could be challenged. Fines, liens, all of it. So what do? We demand an election. If they refuse, we file a lawsuit to compel one. And if it turns out the board has been operating illegally, you might have grounds to sue for damages related to those fraudulent fines and the stress they caused. Let's do it. Martin drafted another letter, this one demanding that the HOA hold elections in accordance with the bylaws. The letter was addressed to the entire board, not just Brenda, and it cited specific sections of the bylaws and Georgia HOA law. The response came from Brenda personally, not the HOA's lawyer. Her letter was curt. The board's composition is in compliance with all relevant regulations. Your client's interpretation of the bylaws is incorrect. But she didn't explain how it was incorrect. She didn't provide documentation of past elections. She just denied the problem existed. She's bluffing, Martin said. Time to file suit. The lawsuit was filed in Bibb County Superior Court. Lucas Quinton vs. Riverside Oaks Homeowners Association, Inc., et al. We were suing to compel an election, to invalidate all fines and penalties issued by the allegedly illegitimate board, and for damages related to harassment and fraudulent lien filing. When the HOA board members were served with the lawsuit, the reaction was immediate. Kenneth called me, sounding panicked. Lucas, what the hell? You're suing us. I'm suing the HOA, yes, for violating its own bylaws and for the harassment I've endured. I never harassed you. You're a board member of an illegitimate board that issued fraudulent fines. You're part of the problem, Kenneth. I tried to help you, and I appreciate that. But this is bigger than individual actions now. The entire board structure is corrupt. Kenneth hung up on me. An hour later, Patricia Donovan called, then Tom Waverly. Both were board members, both were angry and scared. I let all the calls go to voicemail. That evening, Dale stopped by my house. He looked tired. Lucas, can we talk? I let him in. Dale sat heavily on my couch. I'm getting heat from everyone, he said. People asking what's going on, why you're suing the HOA. Some folks are angry with you. They think you're causing trouble. I am causing trouble, but it's necessary trouble. Is it though? I mean, Brenda's difficult, but is this really worth tearing the neighborhood apart? I looked at him. Dale, Brenda filed a fraudulent lien against my property. She fined me for violations that didn't exist. She's been running this HOA like her personal fiefdom for 6 years without a single election. That's illegal. If I don't stand up to her, who will? Dale rubbed his face. I hear you. I do. But people are worried. What if the HOA gets dissolved because of this lawsuit? What happens to our property values? The HOA won't get dissolved. The worst that happens is we have an election. Some new people get on the board and things run properly for once. And the best case, Brenda gets held accountable for her actions, maybe faces consequences, and the rest of us can live in peace without worrying about petty tyrants abusing their authority. Dale stood to leave. I hope you're right. I really do, but I think this is going to get uglier before it gets better. He was right. Over the next 2 weeks, the neighborhood split into camps. Some people supported me, seeing the lawsuit as necessary accountability. Others saw me as a troublemaker trying to destroy the HOA over a petty grudge. Brenda worked hard to cultivate that second narrative, sending emails to the entire community painting herself as the victim of my vindictive harassment. I received nasty notes in my mailbox. Someone egged my car. Rachel stopped waving when I drove past her house, and I knew Brenda had gotten to her, told her some version of events that made me the villain. The only bright spot was that more people started coming forward with their own stories of Brenda's overreach. A couple 3 streets over had been fined $2,000 for painting their front door a shade of blue that Brenda claimed violated the color restrictions, even though the paint was from the HOA's approved list. An elderly man had been cited for having his trash cans visible from the street, even though they were behind a fence and could only be seen if you deliberately walked up his driveway. Martin collected all these stories, building a case that showed a pattern of harassment and abuse of authority. The HOA's lawyer, meanwhile, filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, arguing that I didn't have standing to challenge the board's composition, and that any disputes should be handled through internal HOA processes. Martin countered that the internal processes were controlled by the illegitimate board and therefore couldn't be trusted. The hearing on the motion to dismiss was scheduled for late October. Martin was confident we'd win, but he warned me that even if we did, the actual trial could be months or even years away. HOA cases move slow, he said. The courts don't prioritize them. We're looking at a long haul here. I was burning through my savings on legal fees, stressed to the point of insomnia and increasingly isolated in my own neighborhood. But I couldn't stop now. I'd come too far. Then, in early October, everything changed. I was working from home when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Quinton, this is Detective Sarah Keller with the Bibb County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to ask you some questions about the Riverside Oaks HOA. My heart rate spiked. Okay, what's this about? I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you come to the sheriff's office this afternoon? I met Detective Keller at 2 p.m. She was in her 40s, with short dark hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. She led me to an interview room and closed the door. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Quinton. I want to be clear that you're not in any trouble. We're investigating potential criminal activity related to the HOA, and your lawsuit brought some things to our attention. What kind of criminal activity? We've received complaints from multiple homeowners about fraudulent fines and misappropriation of HOA funds. When we started looking into it, we found some irregularities. Significant irregularities. I leaned forward. Like what? Like the fact that Brenda Patterson has been paying herself a salary of $60,000 a year from HOA funds, without authorization from the board or membership. Like the fact that she's been using HOA money to pay for personal expenses, including vacations, car payments, and her daughter's college tuition. I stared at her. She's been embezzling. That's what it looks like. We're still gathering evidence, but the numbers are pretty clear. Over the past 6 years, she's diverted somewhere around $350,000 from HOA accounts into her personal accounts. $350,000. I felt like I'd been punched. How did she hide that? She's the only one with full access to the HOA financial accounts. The other board members see summary reports, but not detailed transactions. She's been coding the payments to herself as management fees and administrative costs. No one questioned it because no one was looking closely. Does the rest of the board know? Not yet. We'll be interviewing them next, but we wanted to talk to you first because your lawsuit documentation has been helpful. The pattern of harassment you documented, the fraudulent fines, all of it supports a picture of someone abusing their authority to hide financial crimes. Detective Keller asked me a lot of questions about my interactions with Brenda, about the fines and the lien and the Sirens. I told her everything, and she took detailed notes. One more thing, she said as we finished up. The emergency siren situation. Walk me through that again. I explained how I'd fixed the sirens, then removed my power supply, then ultimately reinstalled it after the tornado warning. Detective Keller frowned. So the sirens were non-functional for approximately 3 weeks. About that, yes. And during that time, Miss Patterson was aware they were broken but didn't arrange for professional repairs. Correct. She said the HOA didn't have budget for it. But the HOA had plenty of money. She just didn't want to spend it because it might have drawn attention to the accounts. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it made sense. If Brenda had authorized a large expenditure for siren repairs, someone might have looked more closely at the finances. If someone had been hurt during that 3-week period, Detective Keller said, Miss Patterson could have faced criminal negligence charges. As it is, we're building a case for embezzlement, fraud, and potentially racketeering under Georgia's RICO statute. RICO. That was serious. What happens now? We continue investigating. When we have enough evidence, we'll seek an arrest warrant. I'd appreciate it if you didn't discuss this conversation with anyone. We don't want to tip off Miss Patterson. I left the sheriff's office in a daze. Brenda wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a criminal and apparently had been for years. All those fines, all that harassment, it had been about control and cover-up. I wanted to tell someone, but I'd promised the detective I'd stay quiet. So I went home and waited. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, Brenda Patterson was arrested at her home. The charges: embezzlement, fraud, theft by conversion, and criminal racketeering. The local news covered it, describing how an HOA president had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from her neighbors over 6 years. My phone exploded with texts and calls. Kenneth, Dale, Rachel, neighbors I barely knew. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, if I'd known, if the lawsuit had caused this. I told them all the same thing. I'd filed a lawsuit to compel HOA elections and address harassment. The criminal investigation was separate and had been initiated by the sheriff's office based on complaints from multiple homeowners. The truth was more complicated, but that was the official story, and I stuck to it. With Brenda's arrest, the lawsuit became largely moot. Martin filed a motion to dismiss our case, since the primary defendant was now facing criminal charges, and the HOA board had effectively collapsed. The judge granted the motion, noting that the criminal case would likely resolve the underlying issues. The HOA held emergency elections. Kenneth ran for president and won. The new board's first action was to hire a forensic accountant to determine exactly how much Brenda had stolen and from where. The second action was to void all fines issued during Brenda's tenure, pending review. I got a personal letter from Kenneth, apologizing for not seeing what Brenda had been doing and thanking me for standing up to her. You probably saved the HOA, he wrote. If you hadn't pushed back, she might have kept stealing for years. The generator fine was voided. The fraudulent lien was formally removed. My legal fees totaled around $8,500, which the new HOA board voted to reimburse as part of making amends. Brenda's trial was scheduled for the following spring. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office wasn't interested. The evidence was overwhelming, and the DA wanted to make an example out of her. HOA fraud was apparently becoming a significant problem in Georgia, and they wanted to send a message. In early November, I was raking leaves in my yard when Rachel walked over with her kids. She looked embarrassed. "Lucas, I owe you an apology. Brenda told us all these things about you, about how you were trying to destroy the neighborhood out of spite. I believed her. I'm sorry." "It's okay," I said. "She was convincing. You probably saved our HOA fees from going up. If she'd kept stealing, eventually the money would have run out and we'd have been hit with special assessments to cover the shortfall." "I hadn't thought about that. I guess that's true. Anyway, thank you, and if you ever need anything, let me know." After she left, I stood in my yard looking around the neighborhood. The leaves were turning orange and yellow against the blue sky. It was peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt like I could actually enjoy living here. Dale stopped by that evening with a 6-pack of beer. "Figured you could use one of these," he said, handing me a bottle. We sat on my back deck, drinking beer and watching the sun set. "You know what the funny thing is?" Dale said. "If Brenda had just left you alone about that generator, none of this would have happened. She'd still be stealing, still be president, still be running things her way." "I thought about that," I said. "That $250 fine basically cost her everything." Pride comes before the fall, I guess. We clinked bottles. The criminal trial happened in March. I was called as a witness to testify about the harassment and fraudulent fines, which the prosecution used to establish Brenda's pattern of behavior and motive for her crimes. Seeing her sitting at the defense table, looking small and defeated, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Brenda was sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $358,000, which was the total amount she'd stolen plus interest. Her house was put up for sale to help cover the restitution. Her husband filed for divorce. The Sirens got properly upgraded finally. The new board authorized $15,000 for a modern system with cellular backup and redundant power supplies. I wasn't involved in the project, and that was fine. I'd done my part. Life in Riverside Oaks slowly returned to normal. The new board was reasonable and responsive. Fines were issued rarely and only for legitimate violations. People stopped walking on eggshells, worried about petty citations. I settled back into my routine, working from home, maintaining my house, being a good neighbor. The whole experience had taught me something important about standing up for yourself, about not letting bullies, even ones with clipboards and official titles, push you around. Sometimes I thought about that moment when I'd removed the power supply from the Siren controller, knowing it would leave the system non-functional. It had been petty, maybe even dangerous, but it had also been the leverage I needed to protect myself. And ultimately, it had exposed a much larger crime. One evening in late spring, I was grilling burgers on my deck when Kenneth stopped by. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, want a burger?" "I'm good, thanks." He shifted awkwardly. "I wanted to ask you something. The board is thinking about creating a new position, a kind of technical advisor for neighborhood infrastructure. It would be a volunteer position, but we'd pay a small stipend, maybe $1,000 a year. We were hoping you'd consider it." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to avoid any future entanglements with HOA politics. But part of me recognized that this was the neighborhood trying to do better, trying to be more than what Brenda had made it. "I'll do it," I said. But I wanted in writing that I can decline any project if I'm too busy with work, and no fines for generator noise. Kenneth laughed. "Deal. Definitely no generator fines. He left, and I flipped my burgers, watching the smoke rise into the evening air. The sound of kids playing drifted from a few houses over. Someone was mowing their lawn. The neighborhood was alive and peaceful. I'd never set out to be a hero or a whistleblower. I just wanted to run my generator for a few hours without getting fined. But sometimes standing up for a small principle exposes larger truths. Sometimes refusing to back down makes all the difference. The sirens were tested on the first Saturday of each month, their wail rising and falling across riverside oaks, a reminder that the systems were working, that we were prepared for whatever storms might come. Every time I heard them, I thought about how close we'd come to disaster, both from weather and from corruption. But the sirens were working now. The HOA was functioning properly, and I was finally, after months of stress and conflict, at peace in my own home. That was worth more than any fine, any legal fee, any amount of trouble. It was worth everything.